Okay, this is probably going to be a lengthier video. Hopefully I can kind of hold it together and have a decent explanation and kind of a linear type of thought process, so I can be a little bit more clear to explain what a lot of the untruths, you could say, are, as far as what the Illuminati are. So the easiest way to explain it, a lot of people talk about the Freemasons and other groups out there. Some I won't mention, just to keep them essentially from being in public's view, public's eye. But some of the basic foundation, you call the foundation of society, would be like the Rotary Club, Lions Club, Freemasons, Shriners. Who else? That's just a few, but those are all, organizations that work together as a community, as being a member of a group to help hold the basic functioning pieces of society together. In other words, they build parks, they do community service, things such as that, and they all have you're usually prominent members in society. They might be teachers, engineers, doctors, lawyers, judges, someone who's what they call a master of the craft is what you would call it in the Freemasons. But yeah, those societies, those particular organizations are designed to be pieces of the puzzle in order to hold society together and keep it from collapsing, crumbling, falling apart. Because without having those people working together, having weekly, bi-weekly, or bi-monthly meetings, weekly, bi-monthly meetings, so they can kind of discuss their area as well as what's happening in the greater area of the world. The foundation of society would be a lot less stable. We'll put it that way. So there's in the Freemasons lodges, it's basically a chessboard of black and white tiles. And so a lot of people really want to just, especially the dark side, they really want to exemplify that the Illuminati is all dark and all evil. And that's not true. That's clearly not true, because if the Illuminati, which are supposed to be the leaders of the world, were all evil, then we would be sitting in a world that's nothing but darkness and horror. We'll put it that way. Absolute horror, starvation, suffering, war, the four horsemen of the apocalypse, things like that. Pestilence, war, famine. And so when you sit there and you think about that, pride, ego, things like that, those come from the dark side, to be overly prideful and overly egotistical. And so of course they're going to take credit for all of it, right? They want to be the big bad wolf. This is the best way to explain it. And on that side, to a certain extent, they are the big bad wolf. They practice witchcraft, they do dark magic, and these things that no one would really want to think about or hear about. Like, for example, when I was being initiated, I had one particular communication with someone from one of the 13 families that, it basically was a mind fuck. And what she had done is she had kind of been like what you'd call casting a ritualistic spell, and the way she was acting was kind of like pushed back in her seat and kind of like bouncing her head up and down, kind of like what you'd see kind of in an exorcism or in a possession. And she was talking about having a cesarean section without anesthesia, and then there was a girl in the background and some like some machine tools, like a bone saw or something like that going off in the background, and there's a woman screaming in the background. So what she was doing is she was telling a story, and then leaving it to the imagination of the individual by what they could hear, to imagine what was going on in the background according to what she was saying. And so that would kind of be like a ritualistic initiation. And so that's how they're going to make the person go absolutely fucking nuts if they experience that for a long period of time, or they're going to be able to learn how to handle that type of horror. And so that's one of the things that is done to you in order to ascend or to be initiated, is that they test your capabilities of whether you can endure that sort of pain and suffering, psychological torment, and also if you can keep your mouth shut about it. If you're not going like, this person is doing that person's doing that. They want to make sure that since it's a closed loop society, they don't want you to be calling anyone out for their misbehaviors or whatever you want to call it. So that's kind of like an example of what the dark side does. It's part of the initiation, the ritualistic initiation that they do to you. And a lot of people, they don't even survive that. They end up taking their own life. They end up succumbing to substance abuse just to get it out of their head. They end up in a mental institution. They snap. Maybe they do something that gets them thrown in jail. Something like that. There's a lot of different circumstances that can happen to someone who is put under that sort of torment or torture. And that's essentially kind of what the dark side's about. They what you call is they steal, kill, and destroy. That's not really all that they do, but that's kind of just the generalized terms that they try to be exemplified in being, you can say, masters of their craft, right? That's not necessarily true that that's all that they do, and that doesn't mean that just because you know one of them or have associated with the group that's their intention, to steal, kill, and destroy. Okay, so that's kind of something that has been personified in a way to where it makes it sound like it's the only three things that they do, and that's not the case. What's interesting to me is that the light side is never talked about. The good side of the Illuminati, they only get demonized, and so we've got the light bearer, which is Lucifer, and so that's the dark side, right? And so you have to understand that the dark side likes to mimic the light side in their power, in their capabilities, in their knowledge. And so that's why you'll see, God is also a being of light, but it's a being of pure light. It's a being of good light. And so Lucifer, like we said, he likes to mimic God, the real one true God. And so you'll see the dark side likes to do the same thing. They really like to mimic the light side. And so, the true power comes from the side of light. And that's why the dark side will try and steal the light from people who are chosen to carry God's light. And that's quite a challenge for those individuals to stay upright, to avoid all of the tricks and traps of the enemy, what they call the enemy, to maintain their status in their position of where they're supposed to sit. That's not an easy thing to do all at once, and sometimes it's a road that you have to travel in a way to where you are you're protecting yourself, but you're protecting the people around you too, just by not letting them know what's going on. And so sometimes you have to, when you're in the middle of doing something, you're in the middle of a project or a goal, or you've been charged with a task from the higher power, you have to be quiet about what you're doing until the project's almost done. And one of the things that's one of the things is that the dark side will try to sabotage the projects of the light, and then that way the things that come forward on the side of good might get blocked or delayed. You see, the only thing is that the dark side can really only delay the inevitability of the light overtaking it. And so one of the things that you'll see people, a lot of people who are on the dark side will brag about how they're a witch or a warlock and they're like a high level whatever, and they'll say that they had to go party with rock stars, and that's probably true, and they had to go do this and they had to go do that. And You know, and he was saying, one guy was saying how, you know, it looks like they're having fun, they're driving around like a rich car, and they've got beautiful girls on their shoulder and stuff like that, but the person's not having fun because it's something that they're required to do. It's kind of like, you know, the personification of lust, greed, power, pride, you know, not necessarily sloth because they're running around, but this is essentially the 7 deadly sins. And so you look at a lot of, you know, parts of Hollywood, and they will personify one of the 7 deadly sins. So, like, you know, so there, someone was saying that, who was it? Taylor Swift was someone who was initiated into the dark side of the Illuminati, and I can't really say that that's necessarily true, but I know who gave the go-ahead to allow her to become famous. And I also want to say to her personally, thank you for listening and donating that $50 million to your own employees, the people that run your show, the truckers, all the small people. That's much appreciated. I thank you for listening. That'll kind of tell you who I am and what I know. I'm a creature of light. I also know who chose to help the Kardashians kind of make it or break it in Hollywood. I know that gentleman. He's an older person than me. I won't say who, but he also was the one that, you know, he discussed with me about Taylor Swift. God, 20 years ago, probably 20 years ago, gave the go-ahead of her in Hollywood. And you'll find that there's, the way that it's designed is that there's certain people who are in control certain sectors of society and certain control mechanisms. And so Hollywood's kind of like I don't really want to call it a control mechanism because it's entertainment, but there's some levels of what we would call societal directioning, societal molding, you'll say, with the way that some things are put out. Some movies kind of have symbolism and stuff like that most other people wouldn't recognize. Like, what I can tell you right now, that was something that was interesting, was Mad Max Fury Road. You know, they've got the head guy, and I think he had like a giant, I don't know, like a cow skull that he wore or something weird like that, giant skull over his head. And so you got the head guy. He was crazy. That whole story was crazy. But I think that particular movie didn't do justice to the earlier Mad Maxes, just because, you know, Mel Gibson he's epic. He's actually one of the people you would say is a creature of light. He's been harassed and messed with in Hollywood. You know, he did Passion of the Christ and stuff like that. And you know, he got harassed for a period of time, and then he disappeared and then came back. Like, where he worked out quite a bit and ended up, you saw some pictures of him, he was yoked, right? He was like, okay, you know, protect himself, took care of himself, right? And so that was one of the things, is that he started doing stuff on the good side, and you know, those are kind of few and far between. You won't see too often that exemplify the light side of what you would say the Illuminati. And so Mel Gibson's one of them. That's obvious, because, you know, he did a movie like Passion of the Christ and other things like that. Another movie that he did that I thought was beautiful was Conspiracy Theory, because that exemplifies like MK Ultras and you know, like CIA spooks and people who did spec ops and were essentially, like, you know, experimented on, tortured, and trained to have a specific purpose. And, you know, the truth's stranger than fiction, we'll put it that way. I don't know how to explain it besides there are people who have experienced that. I can tell you that with 100% certainty. There's people who have experienced similar things to the movie that Mel Gibson put out, Conspiracy Theory. People that get locked in a room and tortured for a long period of time. I actually knew a guy that was a CIA spook. He used to go and do covert operations. They just drop him in by himself, or maybe with one other guy, and he got captured in South America, and they pulled out his whole entire lower jaw worth of teeth. His whole lower palate got ripped out, and he ended up, after they ripped all of his teeth out, he ended up killing the 2 guards that were guarding him, and then he worked his way out of the compound, and he basically emptied the whole compound by himself after he ripped his lower jaw out. You know, he was such a little bastard. He was such a mean person, but he was, you know, he had a kind heart in certain ways. But you know, it's like when that switch flipped, it's like, don't be on his bad side. Anyways, you know, he used to call me Dum Dum, which is kind of funny because it was like Kazoo from the Flintstones. He'd like pop up, make a phone call, pop up. He'd be like, hi, Dum Dum. And it's like, you know, I wasn't the brightest at the time because I was oblivious to what was going on around me. He used to call me Dum Dum. And yeah, so you know, you've got the dark side and the light side. And so back to Mad Max Fury Road. So Mad Max Fury Road, there's a period in time where the guy was up on a cliffside and he was pouring water on the people down below. And so he had he's doing that through a giant skull and bones cross. He's pouring water onto the people below, and that was kind of an interesting experience, watching that, because the symbolism is very similar to what one of the organizations that would go to Bohemia Grove were doing at the time, and that was the Skull and Bones Society. So one of the things that they have concentrated on, and as far as their organization, their group goes, is controlling the fresh water supply on the planet. And so you'll find people like the Bush family. They own like one of the largest land masses above a water aquifer in Ecuador. And they're part of the Skull and Bone Society. Most of the people who are part of that organization, they went through Ivy League schools, particular ones, and so you know, they for them to actually enter into their particular organization, they had to go through the initiation of going through college, going through the classes, going through the rituals that come with becoming part of the group. It's a kind of a secret group when it comes down to it. So, you know, can't say too much exactly as far as what I know about that goes. I don't want to really release any of what their rituals are when it comes to initiation and stuff like that. But there, some of the initiations are a little bit odd, if you ask me. But you know, it's just part of being part of the club, I guess you could say. But yeah, so the way it typically works is that, you know, you've got the 7 deadly sins, and so if you're part of the dark side, obviously you'll be embodying that. So you'll be, you know, pride, lust, greed, envy, all that stuff. You'll see all those. I don't know about sloth as much, because you're forced to run around. But you know, for the most part, the 7 deadly sins are what you embody, and you'll be forced to partake in those sorts of things. And you know, I'm sure that creates some shame and some contempt towards oneself and behaving those ways, and being forced to behave in those ways just to appease your masters. Now, so they get the fame, they get the greed, they get the glory because they're on the dark side. Now, not everyone is left out on the light side when it comes to fame and glory and having money. But the majority of it is kind of exclusively for the dark side, because those are who run that sector of society. And also, well, you know, people on the ground level need to have something to look up towards to achieve, and people have always been